Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. How's everyone doing today? Welcome into the program. Everyone, we hope that you're doing well and you're ready for some Computer America. Today on the program, we're going to deep dive into I often the topic of China pops up, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see what is essentially almost like a dystopian future that could be, that a lot of people warn about here in the United States. You look at situations where mass surveillance is a thing. You look at where the government dictates what a person can do, say, think, or otherwise. And I've always looked to China for the past decade or so, especially to see that whenever the government sees a new technology, be it AI, facial recognition, massive surveillance systems, they are very for it, and they have been implementing it on a very large scale. So, we're going to be looking at the recent video game regulations. You may have heard earlier this month we discussed things like the video game ban and how they are tackling, as they call it, quote-unquote, spiritual opium that video games are now labeled as. It's almost as if they are trying to restrict a drug. You know, how America has had a war on drugs for the past, 30, 40 years. Well, China is about to have a war on video games because their video game market is the largest video game market in the world, and it affects a lot of younger people, and maybe there are some points here that the Chinese government is trying to tackle, but we're also going to dive into the fact that, a lot of these just don't really hold up to kind of our cultural norms. And obviously this is looking outside in, and it's going to be a very strange trip. We hope that you enjoy it. But yeah, we're going to talk about this. So everyone, and that'll be the first part. If there's any time left, we will go ahead and do computer and technology news for the rest of the segment. But everyone, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, everything you need to know. If you can't catch us live on IRN, then the podcast is the next best place to hear. Check out YouTube if you'd like for the video archives. And of course, you can always check out the live video feed over at twitch.tv/Computer America. Follow us on social media, all that good stuff. I would say social media is the best place to find out what we're up to and the latest on the show. And everyone, let's go ahead and get started with today's program. So, as I said before, that's what we're going to be starting with is this whole regulation, and we're going to go ahead and get some refreshers for anyone out there who did not, really pay attention at the beginning of the month. And let's do that. Okay, so we're going to be pulling from, of all places, makes sense, and actually it does make a lot of sense to get the information directly from a source that is very, direct, and that will be the South China Morning Post. This one is from September 8th, and this had to do with the Chinese authorities call in Tencent and NetEase for ear bashing over new gaming restrictions for kids. And this is in direct response to, of course, the video games that up until that point, it was almost, well, they were parental controls, you could do whatever you want, so on and so forth. But now kids are restricted to 1 hour, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so 3 hours a week, and every kid in the country has to obey those rules. So imagine everyone trying to log on to the same system at the same time. Very difficult, I'm sure, to handle, and of course harder to kind of restrict, but thems are the rules. Now let's go ahead and talk about this. You can see it up here on the video portion. But the publicity department of the People's Republic of China and the National Press and Publication Administration, NAPP, have called in major gaming publishers for a meeting, saying that the Chinese gaming giants Tencent Holdings, and by the way, if you want to see just how many games that this will affect, Tencent in particular owns a lot of holdings. Like, they are huge in the entertainment industry, so movies, video games, music, they are a massive force. So this is going to affect a lot of games that if you play video games, I'm sure that you will be affected by this as well. They say that Tencent and NetEase were called in to meet with Chinese authorities on Wednesday to discuss how they will implement Beijing's new restrictions on video gaming for minors, as the government seeks to avoid lax enforcement and workarounds by savvy teenage netizens. So some of the workarounds, I'm sure that a lot of people have already thought about these, but they include, well, the Chinese internet is a little bit different. You have not a code, but you have almost like a driver's license for older people. Once you are of a certain age, you get almost like a login that is strictly tied to your identity. There's no such thing as private internet in China. If you do something, if you comment something, if you do something on the internet, if you leave a comment, post a video, like something, your name is there for everyone to see. And there are workarounds, including adopting other people's identities, using, which are now actually banned, the VPNs. VPNs are banned, but of course they are a workaround. And of course, logging in to different countries or using different countries' access to the internet to be able to get around it. But still, China knows these are workarounds. They're not stupid, and they want to make sure that these don't happen, or at least not on a regular basis. Now, they say that the publicity department of the Chinese Communist Party and the National Press and Publication Administration read propaganda, by the way. So yeah, a lot of this is definitely propaganda and how to effectively propagandize video games. Ordered multiple video game major gaming publishers, game account rental platforms, and video game live streaming platforms to a meeting on Wednesday, which was also attended by the Cyberspace Administration of China. There you go. The Cyberspace Administration. We have a hard enough time here in the U.S. getting someone who is in charge of national security when it comes to cybersecurity, and they have someone who's in charge of just the internet. Pretty different. And they mentioned that in the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, according to the report, and by the way, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism is going to play a key part in this, because we'll find that a lot of the stipulations have a lot to do with the culture that China wants to promote. What are good values? What are good ideas that people should be experiencing in video games? And again, this is all going to start sounding very dystopian. Now, they say that all gaming companies have to strictly enforce the orders of the notice and thoroughly implement the playtime restrictions on minors when they are providing online games to them, and must not provide any online game account rental or transaction services to minors in any shape or form. So there you go. Yeah, which makes perfect sense. Minors should not be buying video games. Even here in the U.S., you have to have a parent account. It's not like kids can use credit cards, which a lot of these accounts you need to to sign up for. So essentially, same thing. But making sure that kids can't buy games on their own. They mentioned that this comes from China's top watchdog for gaming and other forms of online media, issued a new rule, of course, as we mentioned, 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and statutory holidays. So certain holidays, they can play as much as they want. It marked the country's most stringent measure yet to tackle video game addiction among young people. However, many parents have expressed concern that kids can find workarounds. Yes, parents have expressed concern that not that the government is dictating how to raise their kids. No. They are raising concern that my kid is just too smart for me. How are you going to make sure that they don't get around one of the most restrictive governments in the world's regulations? And they mentioned that companies must elevate their political standing, strengthen their sense of responsibility, and recognize the importance and urgency of strictly managing minors and preventing them from becoming addicted to online games. So the meeting was also called to discuss content checks for video games, stressing that games with a wrong set of values, quote unquote, including money worship and quote unquote gay love, need to be boycotted. Additionally, the statement from Xinhua ordered companies to strengthen self-regulation when it comes to monetization and stop game mechanics that aim only to generate profit. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many video games out there, especially ones that come out of China, oddly enough, that do promote gambling, addiction, constantly logging in, constantly spending time, spending money for rare chances at items. There are some very predatory practices in the video game market, and a lot of them happen in China. But some of these are, again, going to be a little strange when it starts talking about the restrictions to modesty, the restrictions to what kind of violence is allowed, and short answer is no violence is allowed. Barely any video games are going to be approved in China with these new rules, and that's what we're going to find out. So we have, so we have that, and the article goes on for a little bit, saying that Tencent is the world's largest gaming company by revenue and accounts for 40% of the gaming market in China, according to figures provided by the State Administration for Market Regulation earlier this year, and So they're attacking the problem at the publisher level, the people who are designing and selling the video games. That's where the regulation is starting to clamp down. So there's that one, and then the next day, so that was September 8th, this one's September 9th, and this has to, kind of go to that fact that this, there are kind of consequences, obviously, to these actions. And these consequences can include the fact that Chinese regulators said to slow their approval of new online games as Beijing's campaign against gaming addiction heats up. And think about if the United States said no more video games. Of course, we have the not the end user license agreement. We have the whatever organization rates games, 7, mature, teen, whatever. I'm sure that there's a new system in place that I just can't recall off the top of my head. The point is, we have a certain regulation that says, oh, this game is aimed for kids. There is no nudity. Looking at you, Conker's Bad for a Day. It's there are certain audiences that games are appropriate for, and they don't actually restrict anything. Like if you are a parent and you want to go in and buy your kid the latest super graphic Mortal Kombat game and you drop it in your 6-year-old's lap, hey, that's on you. That's a parenting choice. And while, man, that kid's going to have some interesting dreams, that is not prohibited by the government. Not so much the case here. So they mentioned that the Chinese regulators have temporarily slowed down the approval of new online video games in the country, dealing a fresh blow to the video game companies like Tencent and NetEase. So my whole point was saying all that stuff was that if companies have the regular, they have to get their game rated so that they can advertise it in certain places, but they can still make the game, and they can still publish it in certain areas like Steam and whatnot. But in China, they have to get, I guess, kind of assessed by the government. And the government hands out a certain number of licenses every month, every year. And if you don't have a license to operate in China, then you don't release a game. It's just that simple. You cannot release to the larger market in China without the government stamp of approval. Now, they're saying that that strategy emerged after a meeting on Wednesday called by regulators, and we're going to talk about the new restrictions for video gaming on minors. So the licensing process for new video games has already been slowed down for more than a month, according to a person who was briefed about the meeting, but declined to be named because the information is private. Another person who was also briefed on the discussion said that they would be on hold for a while, and the priority was to cut the number of new video games and reduce gaming addiction in the country. Essentially, they're attacking this from, of course, how the games are made, what's included in the game, so on and so forth, but they're also reducing the amount of games. And let's be real. A lot of the games probably could not be released, with the new rules in place. And a lot of them probably wouldn't be approved, to begin with. So they have to go back, retool them, and now they have to reapply to a very slow, almost a trickle of new video games that can be released in the country. A third person who attended the meeting said the delays in licensing were needed to ensure a smooth and successful deployment of the measures to reduce video game addiction in minors. Now, to once again put this into perspective, they said that between 80 and 100 games are usually approved each month. The regulator did not immediately reply to a request for comment. It is unclear when the slowdown in new game approvals will ease up. Back in 2018, I know I wasn't paying attention to the video game market in China in 2018, but there was a 9-month freeze on new video game approvals, and during that time, 2,300 gaming studios actually went under. They could not sell their game, and they could not do business. So they said that it licensed. So the NPPA typically approves dozens of video games developed by Chinese studios each month, while being particularly strict with imported online games. It licensed 600 games in the first half of 2021. That was more than the 575 games approved in the first half of last year, but fewer than the 850 approvals in the same period in 2019. So just in general. And by the way, we're going to see a lot of the games that are actually being released in China are imports from places like Japan and the United States. They are going to essentially have to release 2 versions of every single game. One that is pretty much approved everywhere else, and one that might work with the Chinese government's values. So on July 22nd, the NPPA announced the approval of 87 games, 86 games from the previous month, and on June 28th, the regulator approved 76 games that were imported and 97 imported games in 2020. So also gives you an idea of the Chinese market. Think about how many Chinese games are kind of released here in the United States, and the answer is just not that many. Obviously, Chinese video games are not meant for an American audience, but you have maybe 100 games approved every single month in China, and you only have about 100 games that are approved in total that are imported every 6 months. So a lot of the games that are very popular, you have never even heard about. You have never played and probably never will play. But from my understanding, there's a couple of instances like this where the number one most popular game, which is actually escaping me because I've never played it, is a video game in China. It has more monthly active users by a lot than a lot of other Western games. That doesn't mean that it's a particularly good game, but it's a game that is available almost exclusively in China. So yeah, this is a huge video game market, but of course being clamped down on very, very hard. So the apparent message from last Wednesday's meeting was to expect further regulation of the video game industry, according to a Beijing-based developer who declined to be named. Regulators have raised their scrutiny of China's video game industry since August, after the publication of an article in the Economic Information Daily, which described gaming as spiritual opium that is harming the country's teenagers, singling out Tencent as a source of the problem. Now, all that being said, that gives you a bit of context on where we've been, and now we get to dive into this post. And gotta warn you, it's a lot of translated Chinese, with bullet points about different points in the meeting, and we're going to kind of pick this apart when it comes to different parts of how to develop a good video game. And we're going to see just how strange this kind of gets. So I apologize. I do not actually, I can't translate this myself for obvious reasons. But hey, as far as I can tell, these are kind of the cliff notes of that meeting that that we just read. And, the two articles that we just read were very PR. There's nothing bad there. They're saying they're fighting video game addiction. Everything's all good, hunky dory. We're gonna get these kids straight. And hey, the video game epidemic is going to be a thing of the past. Now, let's see what was actually said in this meeting. Now, this PDF that was released, these are notes by regulators saying this is what the government would like to see. This is what you should do to make a good video game by Chinese standards. This is not this is not law yet. This is not something that they have to do, but these are things that will weigh on a video game that wants to be released to the Chinese audience. And if they don't meet that criteria, hey, there's probably a pretty good chance it would not be approved over a game that does meet this criteria. So let's get started. So the first one, we have a screen here. All these are screenshots of a smartphone of, again, the notes that were released during this meeting. And they mentioned that it starts out with some words about anti-addiction regulations, asking video game companies to do it themselves instead of the NPPA, asking them to do it for you. Essentially, self-regulate to our standards, which would always be, I would assume, the easiest way for the government to do. If they just shaped up, they wouldn't have to do anything. So that was the first screen. The second screen you have here is key points on regulation and censorship. This is a speech by Chen Zhenyu, the founder and co-owner of China's earliest PC gaming magazine, saying that censorship and regulation preparation, Chinese law and regulation, we will find field experts to review games containing history, religion, economy, military, and politics, pop culture, animes, esports, cosplay, fan art, fan service, music, TV, and show. Essentially, this is what the gaming industry is going to try to do. They're going to try to find experts in each of those to find out if things are historically accurate and if they are appropriate. Because obviously you could have a historian sit down, play the latest Japanese game, and they're going to be bad video games. They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know all the pop culture references. They don't know a lot of this. So they're trying to find experts in a lot of this. And, obviously history, religion, economy, military, and politics, that one's going to be pretty easy. Finding experts in pop culture, anime, esports, cosplay, fan art, stuff like that, that's going to be a little bit harder. But they're going to have experts verify everything. That was the first. Second point, number 3, provide needed machine, phone, or console for experts to review the game. Provide documents on how to install and play. So this is what what they're expecting. Don't be silly and think we don't know about games. Many experts here know more about games than you do. Don't think you can escape our review. Be respectful to our review experts. Essentially, don't try to be sneaky and try to, be subtle with your points. Don't try to escape the review process because you're going to hide things that are subtle or just in the context. Nope, they want everyone to really understand that they know what they're looking at. They are not a tone deaf review board. No, they are experts in the field, so they claim. Is that the case? Only time will tell. Now, they mentioned that content review, number 1, value. Game is not only about entertainment, it bears the responsibility of the society. Games that have too many developers, personal agenda is forbidden, and it's our first rule. Here is the list. So immediately, right there, the content has to be good for society. It bears the responsibility for society. Video games are not just about entertainment. They are about a message and what people can think, do, how they behave, how they react. That right there. And they say right there, this is our first rule. That's a big difference than here in the US. No one picks up a video game, or no sane person picks up a video game thinking, this is where I get my ethics from. This is where my moral compass is centered around. Video games just aren't that to a lot of people. But China wants to make sure that everyone knows video games have an impact, apparently, and it has to have the right message, according to them. So some of the rules and what it really means what it really means to have these values that they honor. So the first one of these values is money is number 1. You can't force players to spend, and be clear about loot box changes, which is clear. Don't rip people off. I think regardless of your stance on video games, your country of origin, anything like that, people don't want video games to be skeezy. Make sure that people are paying for the game and you are delivering on the game that people are paying for. That goes to kind of gambling, loot boxes, bait and switch kind of tactics. So that one's pretty simple. Number 2, Wasteland and Outlaws say 1, be clear about the world background about your game and where does it happen? Does it happen in China, in some sensitive area? Can you explain it by yourself? And again, a lot of this is poorly translated, but they want to make sure that the setting matters. If it's a dystopian future, is it a dystopian future with, the ruins of the Chinese government behind it? Is it super fantasy and you can't really explain it yourself? Things like that. They want to make sure it's not too fanciful and not too offensive to anyone out there. Number 2, vague about morality. Players should not be able to choose the story progression that goes toward evil or anarchy. Have you ever played a video game like, any RPG, Skyrim, obviously any Elder Scroll game, Dragon Age and Origins and stuff like that. One of my favorite was Jade Empire back in the day. A lot of video games allow people the choice of either choosing a good or a bad option. And while I think it's not really reflective of the person, but you have that choice that if you want to be the bad guy, if you want to go on a murder spree and that is your storyline, hey, that's just another option of replayability. If you want to go through again and be the good guy and help everyone and never hurt anyone, there are pacifist playthroughs of certain games. Think like Dishonored, where you never kill a single person in the entire game. You just spend the whole game sneaking around. Things like that. That give you different options. That's a very common tactic in role-playing games. Here, they're saying, don't give people the option of morality. only positive outcomes, no evil, no anarchy, good, law-abiding, kind characters. That is what, and again, I need to stress, this is kind of what they're looking for. This was a message by the Chinese government to video game developers, especially Tencent and NetEase. This is what we're looking for in video game regulation. Don't make us write laws to have to, to make us regulate this, because this is what you should be doing. No evil, no anarchy, no bad playthroughs. Everyone is a good, law-abiding citizen. Everyone listens to their, to their government. Everything is good. So that was number 2. Next value, number 3, animes. Second dimension is an internet slang in China that means anime because they are 2D. There you go. So animes. Anime games are a misuse of Japanese culture, and it is hard for us to review. We think many anime games are negative and dangerous in narrative. So for those who are history buffs, China and Japan have a pretty bad relationship going back for quite a while. And, well, it doesn't just stop at the military history or anything like that. Nope. Extends on into anime. They mentioned that, number 1, misuse of Japanese culture. So they're trying to muddy the waters a bit by saying that, we're not going to approve anime games because the Japanese people find it offensive. Number 2, culture of IRL weapon turning into anime girl, which is something that I guess happens in anime, where you have characters that are different types of firearms and weapons and tanks and stuff. Japan's weird, in a very weird way, but still, they decided to single that one out. Culture of IRL weapons turning into anime girls. And 3, change or modify history. For example, some players think that, something other. So essentially, I guess one theme that a lot of cultures pick up, and obviously Japan will do this too with their animes, is that they make games on a what if. Obviously, history is history, and it's up for some kind of debate. But a lot of video games imagine a world where what happens if the United States did not win the Revolutionary War? What happens if World War II ended a little bit differently? What happens if, so on and so forth? Those what ifs are not allowed because, hey, questioning the stated facts of history is also a no-no in China. You cannot dispute facts and events that happen in history. If you ever assert that they don't happen a certain way that the Chinese government dictates, then you are in the wrong, and that is what they're referring to when they refer to when they refer to anime games that retell history in a certain way. Okay, so that was number 3, animes. They're their whole category, and it seems like they're just going to not approve those whatsoever. Number 4, AntiSociety, anti-human, saying that Plague Inc. is to aim at killing all humans with a virus. It has no moral standard. By the way, I have Plague Inc. on my phone. I have played that in the middle of the pandemic on an airplane, and I've never once really thought that, man, I can't wait to release my own virus or create my own virus. It was never a thing about morals. It was a video game. It was a challenge, a task, and let's face it, Plague Inc. is a puzzle game. You have a stated goal, you have tools, you have different things that you can do in a different order, and it is your job to figure out the puzzle on how to complete it. But yeah, they're saying that is just not appropriate for their audience, and that Plague Inc. is amoral, or not even amoral, it's just immoral, I should say. They mentioned that another video game called The War of Mine is to teach a player how to survive without caring for others, and is against moral standard. Games should not let players do choice. So again, translation error. Games should not let player do choice when either choice is bad in some way. Think about that. China does not want video game developers, story writers to make a moral imperative where both decisions have consequences. There should only ever be a good choice and a bad choice. And, according to this, these cliff notes, that bad choice should also be inaccessible. There should only be one obvious, right, good, kind choice in video games. Some video games, and I can think of things like The Walking Dead, or some other. Well, let's face it, most story games usually have the main character make an influential decision to maybe save one character, save another. They have different reasons. Kill one character, do another. Go on a mission, don't go on a mission to help or save or kidnap or hurt or whatever. Having those decisions, having impactful decisions in a video game leads to good storytelling. It makes it feel like you are playing a game and not just watching a movie. That is not the case in that the that the Chinese government wants you to have. They want you to have one clear, good choice. Again, games should not let player do the choice when either choice is bad in some way. Now, number 5, and this is the part where the Chinese government, of course, starts clamping down on social issues, and there's going to be a lot here about LGBTQ and gay and stuff like that. So number 5, gay love. Boys love good-looking males love story. In terms of gay content, they will focus on big IPs, boy love alternative storylines. So essentially, some games have like an alternative storyline where, there are gay characters in gay settings and, gay relationships and things like that. They're saying that those are not acceptable. The love story of the same-sex character, we will limit the word use in such a story. You can only say they are best friends. That is a direct quote, by the way. So you can't say that they are... You cannot say that they're in a relationship. You cannot say they are attracted to each other. You can only say that they are best friends, quote unquote. Another, misleading advertisement baiting gay people. For example, a couple of male characters sharing a horse is considered baiting gay people. So there are going to be no gay characters in these stories, or at least if they are, they're only going to be best friends. And any kind of images or advertising or other promotional material that shows two men being very close, like apparently sharing a horse is the thing, is not allowed. There you go. He mentioned, and of course the announcer goes on to list a bunch of gay novels and, kind of say that these are not what we're looking at, this is not what we're looking for. So, gays, not the most popular with the Chinese government, but no surprise there. The next one was Femboys, female makeup, gesture, talking, and use of female voice actors, gender-neutral cross-dressing, or quote-unquote sissy boys. Characters that you don't know that he is a male unless you look at his lore. So characters that are, and again, this is more referring to females, or females, is more referring to animes in this, where, some male characters may have, more feminine features, stuff like that. So they mentioned that, for example, Genshin Impact's Venti. So anything that puts androgyny, is it a male, is it a female, femboy, giving a male classically feminine features, using a female voice actor for a male character, stuff like that is unacceptable. And of course, this can be seen as kind of promoting the wrong set of values. So gender neutral, cross-dressing, and sissy boys not allowed, or not going to be allowed in video games. Very, very strange lines to draw, but clearly this was thought out, and it actually does go to show that they are in some ways in touch with, this particular genre of kind of anime video games. you got to give them credit. They kind of know some of the tropes, and they know the characters, and they know what's going on here, but they also know that they don't like it, and they're going to ban it. So they mentioned that changing historical figures into female, mentioned that female version of Three Kingdom or Journey to the West. So rewriting history, once again, not allowed, not going to be allowed, and especially rewriting them as males into females, definitely not allowed. Men should be men, they should be proper, they should speak like men, and it should be obvious who men are, because that's also a thing. China's obviously very anti-gay. They see, this. There was an article that was released earlier in September where they banned K-pop for the exact same reason. They felt that the men were too feminine. They felt that they were too kind of girly in certain ways. They weren't projecting masculinity as the Chinese government would want them to project masculinity. So they banned K-pop. Very, very consistent, at least in that way, that they are trying to project masculinity in one way, which I guess here in the United States you would call that, kind of toxic masculinity, instead of saying that, a man is a man regardless of, kind of how they portray or what they do. Like if you identify as a male, then, hey, you are manly enough. Nope. There's a correct way to be a man. And that's what video games are going to have to project. So there's that story. The next one is culturally appropriate, saying that using light-toned, relaxed gameplay to design a series event. Do not copy from Wikipedia. Wikipedia is, first of all, I don't think Wikipedia is available in China. So they're saying to developers, make sure that you don't go to Wikipedia, because that is a form that is not controlled, or that the Chinese government does not get to control that narrative. And while it is accurate and very well sourced in a lot of ways, accuracy is not exactly what they're going for. Here. So they mentioned that culturally inappropriate, developers, personal agenda, religious inquisition. So these are, some of the topics covered in the making sure video games are culturally appropriate. So number one, naming, copy or reference other games' logos and name. Do not have a meaningful name. Essentially, do not have a name for your video game like The People's Revolution or something like that. Make it a nonsensical, lighthearted name for a game. So it doesn't, so that I'm guessing that one is more to draw that distinction between reality and video game, and you can't, let's say, Hello Kitty Island Adventure, no one's going to mistake that for real life, or hopefully not. No one's going to mistake that for any kind of allegory for real life. That's what they want video game naming to be. Number two, storytelling. Be careful when you add real-life cultural elements into a game. Need to point out how a culture is advanced than others. They mentioned that the Wuxia style game is boring because they are becoming similar. Many companies put too much money into art design and ignore storytelling. Think about that. The government is telling people your stories are boring. Everything just looks the same, or you spend too much money on graphics, not enough on storytelling. I've disagreed with so much in all this, but if your game looks good, but the writing is crap, then it's probably going to be a crap game. But also, I don't think we need the Chinese government to really tell us that. So, but hey, whatever's a wake-up call. So with that being said, Forbidden Example, they give a couple of video games that are already out there, and they mentioned that this is for religion. You're not allowed to become a god or a deity. So some games have you, let's see if I can think of an example. Probably God of War, where you know that you're Kratos and you have your son and you have your son and stuff like that. But obviously dealing with gods and then yourself becoming a god and, working through the pantheon, going on so forth, that would be forbidden. If there's any illusion that your character is in some way supernatural or, again, a deity, that would be bad video game design and would be forbidden. Character turning into a deity that is not a Chinese culture, we do not recommend giving us such a game to review. So if someone's game becomes an allegory for Christianity or Jesus, or a deity that is not Chinese, so let's say an Indian god, or let's say, hey, I just use God of War. Any of the Greek or Roman gods, or any of the Norse gods, all of those would not be allowed. It has to be of Chinese mythos, and it has to be done respectfully. Not that you can become, something from Chinese mythos. No, but it has to include Chinese mythology. And they mentioned that glorifying Japanese samurai and their spirit. There are many games. I think one that just came out recently was like Ghost of Shurima or something like that. That was a Japanese samurai game, and a game like that would not be approved because there's a whole subset of video games that you are a lone samurai and you're up against a massive force. That kind of game is forbidden under these new regulations. So just to give you an idea of how much they're drilling down into the different elements of what makes a good enough or a recommended type of video game for the Chinese audience. And again, these are not regulations, yet they are guidelines that they are proposing to Tencent, NetEase, and many other video game developers in China. So, number 3, music and art. The game looks too Japanese than the real Japanese game, even has Japanese voice acting, but has no Chinese subs. Essentially, stop making video games for Japan or like Japan. Stop copying Japan. You have to come up with your own stuff. Japanese voice acting is not the same as the sub, saying that we experts here know Japanese. Don't think we don't understand that. Essentially, you could sub it in Chinese and have it say, China's great, I love China, China's really awesome. And then the actual Japanese that's said in the video game be something, totally subversive. They're bragging that they know Japanese, so don't try to pull a fast one. There you go. They mentioned that placing Japanese samurai ear era style body armor in Chinese Three Kingdoms style game, misleading younglings, essentially, or younglings being kids. Yeah, don't include anything samurai style. They're really going against Japanese style games and samurai style armor. So the next one, history. Forbid modifying history or changing a historic figure. And again, that's where they kind of come into this Three Kingdoms style, because China has this whole, well, actually, was it Japan that had the Warring Kingdoms? No, that is the Warring Kingdoms era happened in China. And it's pulled on for a lot of different video games. When you had these large factions clashing in China's history, and it's something that a lot of video games have kind of romanticized and changed to their, to kind of change their story to make it their own. But that would be forbidden. That would be forbidden. It has to be accurate, and again, make sure none of your male historic figures turn into female randomly. Do not intentionally design a character weaker or stronger to show bias towards a certain history era. If maybe someone is thrown back into history and suddenly they're very weak compared to, their past selves, or the past is better than it is now, that is forbidden. Do not glorify World War II evil side. Do not show too much of Japan, German weapons, and uniforms. So do not glorify, and think about all the different games. Nazi enemies, be it Nazi zombies or, video games that are set in World War II, is usually in Western culture a very safe enemy. No one is going to come to the aid of the fact that you are, hunting down and killing people in a World War II style setting if the enemies are Nazis. Because, hey, let's face it, that's a very safe enemy. Everyone reviles those, that ideology. But in China, they're saying don't even mention it. Definitely don't idolize it, and definitely don't mention it too much. And of course, war criminals becoming playable characters, don't do that. They mention 2 different games such as Azure Lane and Black's Surge Knight. And they mentioned that censored worship names should be censored enough so that people can't figure out who they are just by looking at the name. Forbidden characters designing based on war criminal or negative historical characters. Of course, you would have to be in China to decide who the Chinese government doesn't like at the current moment. So don't mention any characters, even if they are historically accurate. Don't mention them if they are quote unquote bad historical characters. So there you go. So this whole section here, we might skip over this, but they're talking about Germany and Japan wartime uniform. Don't glorify other countries' history, for example, and they give a couple of different video games. They definitely sourced this with, exact examples. They weren't just picking randomly. They were actually picking precise examples. Making players' interest in Japanese history more than Chinese history, so don't glorify Japan over China. Number 5, assigning characters into incorrect historical stories, saying that Wonder Woman has nothing to do with the Amazon forest. So I think Wonder Woman is an Amazonian, I think. That's like her backstory. But yeah, assign characters into incorrect historical stories. So no fantasy, I guess. I don't know where they're getting that there. Changing the history. In Civilization 6, the game encourages players to destroy barbarian camps, its colonization, and lack of moral standard. For anyone who's ever played a Civ game, that's kind of the early game, is that you are a particular society and you can pick, which nation that you want to start as, either Egyptian or German or English or Native American, whatever it may be, and you destroy barbarians, rampaging barbarians that are going through the countryside. China is saying, no, that's just imperialism by another name, and that is forbidden. It's pretty crazy. They also mentioned that Blur the History Paradox's interactive game. It shows the dark side of the history and lets players participate into it, misleading players. Essentially, gamifying war crimes is also against the rules. Now, let's see. So we have like 6-7 minutes. There's a lot here that unfortunately I didn't get to. I want to make sure that this includes as much as possible. So we're going to start speeding this up a little bit. Now, the next part here was religion, myth, fairy tales, and ethnic tales. No developers' personal agenda. Saying 1, misdesign the religious fraction, and they mentioned some games that actually do this. Misuse religious symbols, Christian cross, Buddha symbol, Nazi symbol, and Cthulhu myth. Humans can't win over the god. So essentially, don't misuse religion in certain ways. No cults, no magic, no witchcraft, things like that. Technical review, reskin, forbid reskin and remake of an old game. Disguise a foreign game as a Chinese game. I feel like that's going to happen a lot because that has definitely happened here in the United States, where they have reskinned a game and tried to call it something else. But that's definitely a good technical kind of point. Now, they said that require real ID to require real ID to register, saying that 1, be up to date. We use our censorship department's head name to test our filtering system. If our head is changed, you need to be up to date about it. Saying that, so tell the player that the word is not allowed, but not illegal. How could you tell a player that our president's name is illegal? Monitoring in-game voice chat and picture uploading system. Some people are using Xi Jinping's profile picture as their profile picture, and they need an in-game report system. So pretty funny there. Essentially, they have to sign in with their actual identity, which, that was always the case, but then make sure that the sensitive word filtering is up to date. If they, quite famously, a couple years ago, they banned Winnie the Pooh for references to their leader. And hey, your word filter system better catch all references to Winnie the Pooh because, you can't make fun of Xi Jinping. There you go. They mentioned anti-addiction. Some games are not kicking players fast enough when the weekly timeout is used. Forbid trial users, no ID. Up to date on the latest regulation, telling players only 8 to 9, they're only allowed to play during that 8 to 9 window during those 3 days. Let our game reviewers be able to buy in-game content without paying. So they need to make sure that all the different aspects of the game are available to them to test. They mentioned that regulation on word usage: English, Japanese, traditional Chinese, non-standard font, unfamiliar old ancient Chinese words, internet slang, and text emoji, Chinese words that are imported from Japan. So essentially those are all words that are not allowed in these games. Or at least have some form of regulation. So no English, no Japanese, no traditional Chinese. You're going to have the more recent Mandarin Chinese. And make sure text slang or internet slang and text emojis are not used. Violence. Here's a fun one. And again, we're going to start speeding up here. No blood and red color hit effect. They said that players should not be able to see anyone's underwear, even if there's violence. Using the words such as kill, shoot, or dead. Designing game contents that are against moral standards, such as bounty hunting, steal, heist, arson. PvP is allowed, but players can't raid other players' property because this is considered their belonging. So you could think about games like Rust, where you can actually go into people's camps and steal their supplies. No. That is not allowed, not by the Chinese government. You cannot steal someone's stuff. You can fight them, but you can't steal their stuff. They mentioned that character class that is violent, so no assassin, no hitman, no pirate. And they mentioned that go against the socialist core value. So no sex workers, casino, bad words, assassin gameplay that lets player hate each other. Getting really into the minutia here. I think we can finish this before the end of the show. So this part's a little bit long. Using impolite language, so no swearing. Shame. Don't do that. Smoking, drinking, tavern, tattoos. A female character holding a smoking pipe, for instance, that is not allowed. And tattoos, of course, go back to, kind of gang violence and things like that. So you can see where they want to make sure that no one looks of ill repute. Number 9, ascending into deity, marriage, and giving birth, playing with a female streamer, having multiple wives. I guess a fantasy of having multiple wives or having a marriage and giving birth to a child. Things that are mainly unattainable for your average Chinese citizen. I don't know. Okay, so gambling, selling loot boxes is very forbidden, so no more loot boxes. No gacha gaming, which is huge in Japan. If you don't know what that is, Google gacha, Gacha. Treasure hunting, exploring, recruiting, weapon upgrades that are based on RNG. Characters with randomized starting attributes that players can reroll. So essentially no paying for things that give you an advantage the more money you spend, and encouraging people to put money in, get a result out. Put money in, get a result. Put money in, get a result. That kind of gameplay loop and monetization strategy is going to be forbidden in pretty much all forms. So, take that as you will. Now, they mentioned that complete percentage, underdeveloped or unfinished content is banned. Actual games are different from the version that they provide for reviewing. Repetitive and copy pasting art assets. Please provide enough in-game currency for us to play so that we can review. Fake advertising and fake hype. Do not use coming soon, to be continued. If you did not finish, go back and finish it. We don't want to see unfinished games. That throws out like 90% of the video games here in the US. Lack of description about the in-game world background, character, and gear. Need to disclose payment method and limit advertising. So they say that game bugs, game map review, please refer to historical Chinese map and Chinese history. In-game payment review, celebrity, IP author, and publisher have insulted China in the past. And, so they want to make sure that anyone associated with the game has not run afoul of the Chinese government. Make Chinese ugly, such as showing the dirty part of Shanghai and Chinese cooking family pets. Make sure that you don't do that. So don't put China, and again, we're going to wrap it up here. That's what the music means. Don't put China in a bad light. Don't make Chinese look bad whatsoever. And of course, hey, have fun with it, I guess. Ladies and gentlemen, I did not think that would take up the whole hour, but that was a lot of fun to talk about in a weird dystopian way. If you want to see what an overactive game review process looks like, I would say that the video game market in China is about to stagnate in a huge way. Obviously, curbing addiction among youth under 18-year-olds is a thing, but man, this is going to have far-reaching implications on the entire gaming market. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, have a great one. We'll catch you here tomorrow. Have a great day. So much. Bye, everyone.